Have you ever wondered what you're really capable of? I don't mean your talents or your dreams, I mean the darker stuff. Could you hurt someone? Follow orders that go against your values? Stand by while something terrible happens? It's uncomfortable, right? But this is exactly the question the Lucifer Effect dares us to ask. What turns ordinary people into perpetrators of cruelty? We'd all like to think we're the good guys. But what if, in the right situation, any one of us could become the villain? Let's explore what psychology says, and why this conversation might be more personal than we think. The Lucifer Effect was coined by psychologist Philip Zimbardo. Yes, the guy behind the infamous Stanford prison experiment. In short, it's the idea that good people can turn evil when placed in certain environments. This isn't about bad apples. Zimbardo argues it's often about bad barrels, situations that bring out the worst in us. He saw this firsthand when he divided college students into guards and prisoners. Within days, the guards, ordinary students, started showing abusive behavior. The experiment had to be stopped early. It got that dark. So what does this mean for us? It means we're all more vulnerable than we like to admit. We often think of evil or cruelty as something out there, something other people do, dictators, criminals, people on the news. But what makes the Lucifer Effect so unsettling is that it challenges this distance. It brings the question home. Because here's the thing, cruelty isn't always loud. It doesn't always come dressed in uniforms or with dramatic music in the background. Most of the time, it shows up quietly, in our silence, our inaction, and our blind obedience. Think about the everyday places you spend time in. Your workplace, your school, even your home or your online communities. How often have you seen something that felt off but didn't speak up? How many times have you seen someone treated unfairly and thought, "It's not my business," or "someone else will say something"? Maybe you've laughed along with a joke that felt wrong just to fit in, or followed a rule you didn't agree with because it was easier, or ignored a gut feeling that told you something wasn't right. That's what makes the Lucifer Effect so important. It's not about rare extreme cases. It's about the conditions that exist in everyday life. Conditions that can lead even well-meaning, decent people to act in ways that go against their values. And often, these conditions don't look dangerous at first. They look like a manager asking you to just fudge the numbers a little. A friend group that slowly starts excluding someone for being different. A workplace where speaking up about injustice means risking your job. A social media culture that encourages pile-ons, shaming, and outrage. Each moment might seem small, but they add up, and over time, they shape who we become. Psychology shows us that most people who engage in harmful behavior don't do it because they're evil. They do it because they're scared, insecure, under pressure, or convinced it's normal. That's the real power of the Lucifer Effect. It shifts the focus from bad people to bad environments and shows us that anyone, under the wrong conditions, can make harmful choices. And if that's true, then the reverse is also true. We can also design environments that bring out the best in us. Cultures that reward honesty over obedience. Communities where people feel safe to speak up. Relationships where silence isn't mistaken for loyalty. This isn't just psychology, it's personal. Because every day, in small ways, we're all faced with choices. And knowing how this effect works gives us a chance to recognize it, resist it, and respond differently. That's why this matters. So what causes this effect? Psychologists have found a few key ingredients. 1. De-individuation. When people feel anonymous, they behave in ways they wouldn't otherwise. That's why online hate thrives behind usernames. 2. Obedience to authority. As seen in Milgram's experiment, people are surprisingly likely to follow orders, even if they hurt someone, when an authority figure tells them to. 3. Group pressure. Humans are wired to belong. That means we often go along with the group, even when it goes against our morals. 4. Moral disengagement. People justify harmful behavior by changing how they see the situation. They deserved it. I was just doing my job. None of this means we're doomed, but it means awareness is key. So where do we see this? You don't have to look far to see the Lucifer effect at work today. In fact, it's hiding in plain sight, in offices, schools, social media, even in families. The scary part? Most people don't even realize they're part of it. Let's break down a few everyday places where subtle cruelty, or what psychologists call everyday evil, creeps in. 1. The workplace. Ever worked in a toxic environment where gossip spreads like wildfire, favoritism is normal, and no one questions unethical decisions because they don't want to lose their job? That's the Lucifer effect in action. People stay silent, not because they agree, but because they're afraid. Power dynamics, fear of losing status, and pressure to conform make it easier to go along than speak up. It's not that people are bad, it's that the system rewards silence and punishes integrity. 2. Social media. Think about how often someone gets canceled online. One person makes a mistake or even just has a different opinion, and suddenly thousands of strangers are mocking, shaming, or threatening them. It becomes a public spectacle. This is digital dehumanization. We forget there's a real person behind the screen. The crowd gives us a sense of anonymity, so we say things we'd never say face to face. The line between justice and cruelty gets blurry fast. 3. Schools and peer groups. Bullying isn't always physical. It can be exclusion, sarcasm, humiliation. And often it's not just one bully, it's a whole group staying silent, watching, and doing nothing. Have you ever seen videos of bullying taking place and people recording it instead of intervening? Young people learn early that speaking up has a cost. The longer this lesson goes unchallenged, the more it shapes how they behave as adults. The Lucifer effect teaches us that if we want to raise courageous kids, we have to model courage ourselves. 4. Authority figures and blind obedience. This one is subtle but powerful. How often do we follow orders or traditions without questioning them, simply because someone above us said so? Whether it's a boss, a teacher, or a leader, we're wired to respect authority, but sometimes that respect becomes submission. Think of moments in history or in current politics where people followed unjust laws or harmful directives because they were told it was the right thing to do. This isn't just history, it's happening now. 5. Cultural silence. In some families, cultures, or religious groups, questioning authority is seen as disrespectful. Speaking up about abuse or injustice is discouraged. People are taught to keep the peace by keeping quiet. This silence can protect toxic systems. And that's exactly how the Lucifer effect sustains itself, by normalizing harm and punishing anyone who challenges it. Why this matters right now. We live in a time where information travels fast, but empathy doesn't always keep up. Outrage is profitable, silence is safer, and cruelty often wears the mask of justice. That's why being aware of how and where the Lucifer effect shows up today is so important. It's not about judging others, it's about becoming conscious of our own choices, our own roles in the systems we're part of. Every small moment of courage matters. Every voice that chooses kindness over conformity chips away at the system. We can't change everything overnight, but we can become more aware. We can challenge the culture of silence, and we can start by noticing where, today, the line between right and wrong is quietly being blurred. Now, let's talk about something most people really don't want to believe. You're not always the hero in your story, at least not automatically. That's not a jab at your character. It's a wake-up call about how situations shape behavior more than we think. This is one of the most important and uncomfortable truths from the Lucifer effect. Dr. Philip Zimbardo, the psychologist behind the infamous Stanford prison experiment, made it clear. Good people can do terrible things, not because they're bad, but because the situation allows or even encourages it. But I'd never do that. We all like to believe we'd stand up for what's right, that we'd never follow a cruel order or hurt someone just because everyone else was doing it. But research tells a different story. In the Stanford prison experiment, average college students were randomly assigned to be either guards or prisoners in a simulated prison. The results were shocking. Within just a few days, Some guards started abusing their power, humiliating, punishing, and dehumanizing the prisoners, who became submissive and distressed. And remember, these were just regular students. No one expected them to act like that. Zimbardo's conclusion? The situation, not personality, shaped the behavior. This doesn't mean we don't have free will. It means we often underestimate just how powerful the environment is. And unless we're aware of that influence, we'll get swept up by it. It's not just in experiments. Think about it. In a corporate setting where profits are rewarded over ethics, even well-meaning employees might cut corners. In a political group where loyalty matters more than truth, members might stay silent about harmful actions. In a school or social group where bullying is normalized, students may join in or look the other way, just to fit in. The scary part? People justify their actions. They tell themselves, everyone's doing it, or I'm just following the rules. And just like that, character gets overpowered by the current of the situation. Ever heard of the frog in boiling water? There's a classic metaphor. Put a frog in boiling water and it'll jump out. But put it in cool water and slowly turn up the heat, and it won't notice it's boiling until it's too late. That's what happens when harmful systems escalate slowly. People adjust bit by bit. They tell themselves, it's not that bad, until suddenly they're part of something they would have sworn they'd never tolerate. This is how cruelty hides, not in grand evil acts, but in small compromises made one after another. So what can we do? This truth, the power of situations, can be terrifying, but it can also be empowering. Because if behavior is shaped by the environment, that means we can shape better environments. If systems normalize cruelty, we can challenge those systems. If silence enables harm, we can choose to speak. If social pressure fuels fear, we can create cultures of courage. But the first step is humility, a willingness to admit, I'm not immune to influence, but I can choose awareness over autopilot. That's the difference between reacting and responding, between being swept up and standing strong. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be conscious. Because when you understand that character is not fixed, and that even good people can be pulled into dark roles, you start to build the muscles of resistance. You pause before joining in. You speak up when it's hard. You create space for others to do the same. And just like that, you begin to reverse the Lucifer Effect. Now, it's one thing to talk about theory, the Lucifer Effect, power dynamics, and philosophical choices, but it's another thing entirely to see it play out in real life. This part is about connecting the dots, looking at real situations where ordinary people just like us faced real moral decisions, and what they chose to do when the pressure was on. These case studies aren't about pointing fingers, they're about holding up a mirror, because the truth is, every one of us is capable of both great compassion and shocking cruelty, depending on the situation we're in and the beliefs we carry. Let's take a walk through a few real stories that reveal just how fragile and how powerful human choice can be. 1. Abu Ghraib prison, when guards become abusers. Perhaps the most famous modern example of the Lucifer Effect in action is the Abu Ghraib prison scandal during the Iraq War. In 2004, photos leaked showing US soldiers, ordinary people, many of whom had never shown signs of cruelty, abusing and humiliating prisoners. These weren't seasoned criminals. They were young men and women, many barely out of training. So what happened? The environment happened. No clear leadership, no accountability, a culture of us versus them, dehumanization of prisoners, long shifts, stress, fear, boredom, all of it added up, and when they felt no one was watching, and maybe no one cared, they started doing things they would have never imagined themselves doing. This wasn't just about bad apples, it was about a bad barrel, a broken system that brought out the worst in people who might otherwise have been kind and decent. Sound familiar? 2. The bystander effect, the case of 𝐾𝐨𝐧'𝐭. In 1964, a young woman named 𝐾𝐨𝐧'𝐭 was murdered outside her apartment building in New York City. At the time, newspapers claimed that dozens of people heard her cries for help and did nothing. Now, later investigations revealed some nuance. not quite that many witnesses, and some did try to help. But the core psychological phenomenon remains. The more people there are, the less likely anyone is to act. Why? Because we assume someone else will step up, or we don't want to get involved, or we're afraid we'll look foolish. That little voice in our head says, "Don't make it your problem, just stay out of it." And so, silence becomes complicity. 3. The heroic resistors, ordinary people who said no. But it's not all dark. Let's flip the script. Take Oskar Schindler, for example, a businessman who used his factory during World War II to shelter over 1,000 Jews from the Holocaust. At first, he wasn't a saint. He was in it for the profit. But at some point, something clicked. He saw what was happening, and he chose to act. He put his reputation, his fortune, and his life on the line. Why? Because he decided that his values mattered more than following orders or going with the flow. And he wasn't the only one. Irina Sendler, a Polish social worker, smuggled over 2,500 children out of the Warsaw Ghetto. Claudette Colvin, before Rosa Parks, refused to give up her seat on a segregated bus at just 15 years old. Countless nurses, students, whistleblowers, and quiet citizens who saw something wrong and made a small, brave choice to resist it. They remind us that the Lucifer Effect doesn't have to win. So, what do these stories teach us? They teach us that cruelty doesn't come from evil people. It comes from unchecked systems, dehumanizing language, and passive obedience. It grows in silence. It grows in fear. But resistance grows in awareness, in empathy, in courage, in one person standing up and saying, "This isn't right." Other examples are corporate scandals. From Enron to Wells Fargo, individuals went along with unethical behavior because it was the norm, and questioning it meant risk. Bullying in schools. Often, the crowd laughs or stays silent. Rarely does someone speak up. Not because they agree, but because fear and belonging win out. That's why case studies like these matter. They take the Lucifer Effect out of the classroom and drop it into our neighborhoods, workplaces, families, even our phones and social feeds. These aren't stories from monsters. They're stories from systems that failed to protect human dignity. Here's an uncomfortable question for you. If you were there in any of those situations, what would you have done? It's easy to say we'd be the hero. But psychology tells us that most people wouldn't be. Unless they had built the muscles of awareness, reflection, and courage long before the moment arrived. That's what these case studies ask us to do, not to judge, but to prepare, to become the kind of person who's ready to choose what's right, not what's easy. So how do we protect ourselves from falling into these traps? Here are some tools. 1. Self-awareness. Ask yourself, am I acting out of fear or pressure? 2. Slow down. Cruelty often hides in rush and chaos. Take time to think before you act or speak. 3. Question authority. Respect isn't the same as obedience. It's okay to ask, is this right? 4. Find moral role models. Surround yourself with people who choose integrity, even when it's hard. 5. Speak up early. The longer a behavior continues, the harder it is to stop. Small interventions can prevent bigger harm. 6. Practice empathy. Try to see the situation from the other person's side. It humanizes them and reminds you of your own values. Let's step away from psychology for a moment and invite an old friend to the conversation. Socrates, the father of Western philosophy. He didn't have neuroscience labs or behavior experiments, but he understood something profound. Our character is shaped by the choices we make, especially when no one is watching. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." At first, it might sound a bit dramatic, but what he meant was simple. If we don't stop to reflect on our values, our actions, our motives, we risk becoming someone we never meant to be. And this connects directly to the Lucifer Effect. Psychology shows us how the situation can influence us. Socrates reminds us that we can still choose. In a world full of pressure, confusion, and social expectations, philosophy becomes the anchor. Let's tie this back to the inner voice. Sometimes, that voice is shaped by fear, past experiences, or cultural conditioning. It whispers things like, "Just go along with it. It's not your problem. You don't want to look weak. This is just how things are." Socrates would challenge that voice. He would ask, "Is that really true? Or are you just avoiding discomfort?" He wouldn't let that voice run the show without interrogation. He believed that asking the right questions, what is justice? What is good? What kind of person do I want to be? Could protect us from blindly following the crowd or reacting in fear. In a way, Socrates was one of the earliest defenders against the Lucifer effect. He believed that conscious thought, honest reflection, and moral courage were our best tools against becoming part of a system that dehumanizes others. When things escalate, people often say, "I didn't think, I just acted." That's what dangerous situations feed on: automatic behavior. Philosophy slows us down. It puts a space between impulse and action. It asks us to step outside the noise and ask, what kind of world am I helping to create right now? And that question matters, even when you're just following orders or just going with the flow. You don't have to be a philosopher in a robe or quote Plato to live philosophically. Every time you speak up when something feels wrong, show compassion when it's inconvenient, question a norm that dehumanizes others, reflect on your own biases or assumptions, you are practicing philosophy. You are choosing awareness over blindness. And in doing so, you weaken the very forces that the Lucifer effect warns us about. Here's something powerful. Socrates was eventually put on trial for corrupting the youth because he encouraged people to think for themselves. The court gave him a choice: stop questioning the system or die. He chose death. Now, that's extreme. We're not saying you should go that far, but the point is this: Socrates believed that living with integrity mattered more than living with comfort. And maybe that's the ultimate takeaway here. Philosophy won't stop social pressure, fear, or systems that promote cruelty. But it gives you the tools to stay human in the middle of it all. By questioning what you're told, examining your actions, and living by your own values, not just the loudest voice in the room, you don't just resist cruelty. You create space for kindness, honesty, and courage to take root. The truth is, yes, we're all capable of cruelty, but we're also capable of incredible kindness. The Lucifer effect isn't here to shame us. It's here to remind us that who we become depends on the choices we make and the environments we build. So next time your inner voice says, "I'd never do that," pause, not to doubt yourself, but to prepare yourself. Because being good isn't about having the perfect personality. It's about choosing compassion again and again, even when it's hard, even when no one's watching. If you found this video helpful, remember to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear this today. Thanks for watching, and remember to remain aware, live by your morals, and we'll see you in the next video.